Hello, guys. Welcome to week two. This week we're going to be going over the Mediastinum. But before we do that, I want to show you guys a good image of the Mediastinum before the Mediastinum and these vessels before they reach the hilum, right? So here we can see the right primary bronchi, or the right primary bronchus. Sorry, bronchi is plural. Right primary bronchus. We can also see the pulmonary artery, right? The right pulmonary artery. We can also see the pulmonary veins, which are inferior and lateral, whereas the artery is superior and medial, right? So we have the right primary bronchus, we have the pulmonary arteries, and then we have the pulmonary veins, right, on the right side. I wanted to show that because it gives a good image, right, of how the hilum would look, right? But this is not the hilum. This is a cut, right? This is a sagittal cut, right? Looking at the mediastinum, the vessels that are coming, these vessels coming from or to the heart, and this is also the trachea, right? The trachea, right? Splitting into the bronchus, right? To the right primary bronchus. Okay, now I'm going to go into the heart structures. Let me X this out real quick, and then I'm going to move into heart structures. Right, so here we have the heart. I'm going to move out a little bit. So, when we see the heart, we have layers of pericardium, right? So, the most superficial layer on the heart is the fibrous pericardium, right? So, imagine two sheets of paper that are put on top of each other, right? So, when you're looking at the two sheets of paper directly on top of each other, on the most superficial paper, right, the paper that is closest to you, that would be the fibrous pericardium. If you were to flip the first sheet, right, on the opposite side of that sheet, that would be the parietal serous pericardium, right? So if you remove one sheet, right, one sheet on the front of that one sheet, we have the fibrous pericardium, right? If we flip that one sheet over, right, the second sheet is still on the table. We flip that one sheet over, we have the parietal serous pericardium, right? So we have that one sheet. We said the front, fibrous pericardium. The back side of that sheet is parietal serous pericardium, right? And then if we move that sheet away, place it on another table, right? We still have this one sheet on the table, right? On this one sheet would be the visceral serous pericardium, right? And then if we flip that visceral serous pericardium over, that's the actual heart muscle, right? So two sheets again, right? So two sheets and we have four different layers, right? So the first sheet, fibrous pericardium, we flip over that first sheet, we have the parietal serous pericardium, right? We move that one sheet over and now we have the last sheet, right? So the layer on that sheet would be the visceral serous pericardium or the epicardium, and then if we flip that sheet over, right, that's the actual heart muscle itself, right? And one thing I want to stress is between the parietal and the visceral serous pericardium, we have the pericardial space, right? So if I have those two sheets, in between those two sheets, right? In between those two sheets, we would have the pericardial space, right? And that may have been a lot, but rewind it back so you can follow it if you didn't follow it when I said it just now. But just remember that analogy, right, when we're looking at the heart, right, and we're pinning the different structures, making sure you're understanding what layer of the pericardium you are looking at. And now we're going to go into the heart structures, right? So now that we talked about the layers of the pericardium, I'm going to remove the fibrous pericardium. On the inside, we know we have the parietal serous pericardium, and then now the visceral serous pericardium attached directly to the heart muscle. We're going to remove that. Now I'm going to remove the subepicardial fat. You guys do not need to know anything about that. Do not worry. Here we have the right and the left auricle, right? These are structures you do need to know. Right and left auricle directly on top of the atria, right? Right auricle on the right atria, left auricle on the left atria. Makes sense, right? Now when I remove the auricles you can see directly inside of the atria, right? Directly inside the atria. Let me remove these structures here. They're making it a little more complicated to see. Okay. Okay, right, so you can see in the atria, right? So we have the pectinate muscle in the atria. And then we also have the fossa ovalis, right? So the fossa ovalis would be that little thumbprint in the atrium. That little thumbprint, right? There's two, and it doesn't label which one it is, but when you're looking at the atrium, right, it's going to be very clear the thumbprint inside of the heart, right? I would say this little region right here. Yeah, I would say this little region right here, right? So this would be the fossa ovalis, right? Because this is the coronary sinus, right? So this is the fossa ovalis, right? Just this little space or this little thumbprint right here, fossa ovalis, right? And we know this because the left atrium is directly, right, directly around this little space or this little hole right here, right? Okay, and then, so we went over that. Now we're gonna go over the right and the left ventricle, right? So right ventricle is right here. Left ventricle a lot bigger is right there. Left ventricle is a lot bigger because it pumps blood to the rest of the body, otherwise known as systemic circulation, whereas the right ventricle only pumps blood to the lungs to become oxygenated, otherwise known as pulmonary circulation. So now we know the left, right atrium and ventricle. We can move on to the trabeculate carnae, right? So if I look inside of this heart muscle here, let me make sure I remove all of the things that are highlighted. Let me just open this up here. Right, so you can kind of see the trabeculate carnae, right? The muscle in the ventricles of the heart, right? That little that little muscle, right? And then we can also see the papillary muscles, right? These little hill-like structures, which are connected to the chordae tendineae, which attach to the cusp of the valve, right? So the tricuspid valve, three cusps, which all are attached to the chordae tendineae, which attach to the papillary muscle. Right, so now we know that. I want to preface that this is the right atrioventricular valve, also known as the tricuspid valve. Right, it only has two names for this structure, whereas the left atrioventricular valve has three. So I'm going to give you a better image of the left atrioventricular valve here. Let me ghost that, right? So this is the left atrioventricular valve, also known as the bicuspid, right? Or mitral, right? So we have bicuspid, mitral, left atrioventricular valve, three names for this one structure. Just this structure right here, right? Right, so only two valves, right? And when I do this, 1, 2, 3, right? So it makes sense why one is called tricuspid and why one is called bicuspid, because the tricuspid has three cusps and the bicuspid only has two. Right, so I'm gonna come back and get a full rendering again. Right, so again we can see the left and the right atrioventricular valves. Right, and I'm pretty sure that's it for all of the heart structures here. Now we're gonna move into the coronary circulation. So again, to even see the coronary circulation, we have to remove the layers of the pericardium, fibrous pericardium, and then we remove parietal serous pericardium, visceral serous pericardium, and then we're directly looking at the heart muscle, right? So, right, and in lab, if we ever pin the heart muscle itself, that layer of pericardium would be visceral serous pericardium. But now that we're looking at the coronary circulation, I'm going to remove the pulmonary trunk. Well, I don't have to remove it. I just want you guys to be able to understand and see the coronary circulation, right? So, right coronary artery coming off the aorta, right? So this is how it be positioned in your body. Right coronary artery, we're on the right side, right? So examine right coronary artery, right? We see the right coronary artery all right here. Right coronary artery. Examine it. Our right coronary artery branches into our posterior interventricular artery, right? right coronary artery, right, coming from the aorta, the ascending aorta, wraps all the way around to the posterior of the heart. And in the posterior interventricular sulcus, we have the right coronary artery, which branches into the posterior interventricular artery. If I examine here, you see here posterior interventricular artery, right? And running with the posterior interventricular artery is the middle cardiac vein, right? And one thing I want to stress about the middle cardiac vein is that it's draining into the coronary sinus, right? So this is the coronary sinus, right? And the middle cardiac vein is draining into the coronary sinus, right? Makes sense. So middle cardiac vein running with the posterior interventricular artery, right? So when we're looking at the left coronary artery is right here. You see that structure in the back. If I examine, the left coronary artery is right here, right? So just this little section right here, left coronary artery. Left coronary artery branches into two arteries. So we have the anterior interventricular artery, right? Coming all the way through the anterior interventricular sulcus, anterior interventricular artery, right? And the second branch of the second branch of the left, right? So we're looking at the left coronary artery right now. The first branch was the anterior interventricular artery. The second branch is the circumflex, right? Circumflex, circle, it wraps around, right? So if I press on this again and examine, right, we see the left coronary artery, right, anterior interventricular artery, and then we see the circumflex. Right, and one thing I want to stress is that make sure you understand the branches of the left and right coronary artery. Right, so I'm showing you this to help you understand, right, how the circulation happens on the muscle of the heart. And then, right, so now that we see that, I want to get you to understand also that the great cardiac vein is running with the anterior interventricular artery, right? So if I examine again, right, we see the anterior interventricular artery running with the great cardiac vein, right? And also I want to show you the small cardiac vein as well. Small cardiac vein. And it's usually running alongside right here. Again, this is one of those terms that have a different name. Ooh, I just messed that up. Let me get back here. Just messed that up. Okay. Okay. So I want you to also see the small cardiac vein, which is here. Right, small cardiac vein. So this is the small cardiac vein here, right? So right marginal vein, acute vein, or small cardiac vein, right? So for you guys, the small cardiac vein, it's going to be about in the same place, right? So one thing I want you to stress to you guys is that all of the veins, they drain into the coronary sinus, and the coronary sinus drains into the right atrium, right? So understanding the path of blood flow is very important, right? So the veins drain into the coronary sinus, right? Makes sense. And the arteries, right, receive blood from the aorta, right? And this applies the heart muscle. And then the coronary sinus, I did show it before, but I want to press it once more just to make sure that we understand what it looks like. Examine, so coronary sinus, you see it draining into the right atrium, right? So if I remove portions of the right atrium, You can literally see if I remove it, the coronary sinus is draining right into it. Okay. Okay. And now we're going to move on to the other structures of the mediastinum. All right, so now we're moving, like I said, into the other structures in the mediastinum. The first structure that I want to speak about, I didn't add the esophagus, so let me do that now. Okay, right, so the first structure that I want to speak about is the esophagus, right? So the esophagus is that muscular structure in the mediastinum here, right? It's right next to the aorta and the vertebral column or the vertebra. Right, it's right next to it, right? That thick muscular structure. And then from there, let me actually inspect it, examine it, so you can kind of see it better. And then from there, I want to move on to the branches of the aorta. So let me unselect that structure. I'm going to move onto the branches of the aorta, right? So this whole structure here is our aorta, right? So that's our aorta, right? So if I examine it, that's how your aorta sits in your body. But there are branches off of our arch of our aorta, and those branches are the brachiocephalic trunk. We have our left common carotid, and then we have our left subclavian artery, right? So those are all of our branches off of our arch of our aorta, or off of our aorta, right? We can say that plainly, right? So you can see the branches here. So we have our brachiocephalic trunk, left common carotid, left subclavian artery, right? So these are all arteries. So, and then now, one thing about our brachiocephalic trunk, it splits into our right common carotid artery and our right subclavian artery, right? So you have a brachiocephalic trunk, two branches, right common carotid artery and our right subclavian artery, right? And then the other branches of our aorta are our left common carotid artery and our left subclavian artery. Moving from there, I want to show us the branches of the superior vena cava. So let me unselect all of these structures, and we're going to move on to the branches of the superior vena cava, right? So that's our superior vena cava, right? And that branches into two veins, right? So our superior vena cava is a vein, of course, and I want to show you how it branches, right? So it branches into our right and left brachiocephalic veins, right? So right, left. Brachio meaning arm, cephalic meaning head. So brachiocephalic, right? So this artery goes to, sorry, this vein goes to the arm. This one goes to the head. So let me just show you those two branches, right? So we have our right brachiocephalic vein, and then we have our left brachiocephalic vein. And then two other structures that I want to show you are the vagus nerve and the left recurrent laryngeal, right? And this structure is important in relation to the arch of the aorta, right? So let me show you the nerve. That structure is specifically important when we come to the arch of the aorta, and I will show you why. Let me just select that nerve. It's lower here. Cranial nerves. There we go. There we go. Right? So bilateral structure, but we usually only look at the left. Okay, so we have, and then, right, so we have our vagus nerve here. And then we have the left recurrent laryngeal. And then I'm going to also select the arch of the aorta. I'm going to select to the left and right brachiocephalic veins, as well as the superior vena cava. And once I examine these, right, you can see the vagus nerve, right, also known as the wandering nerve, coming all the way, right, from the brain. We're going to go over that later on in this course, but you can see the vagus nerve coming down, and then you can see the left recurrent laryngeal. You can see it coming all the way around the arch of the aorta. So let me unexamine that, and right, if I just select the left recurrent laryngeal and deselect the vagus nerve, and then examine that, you can see how the left recurrent laryngeal wraps all the way around the aorta and goes back up towards the head. Right? So left recurrent laryngeal, and then we have coming under the arch of the aorta. It comes under the arch of the aorta. And with that, I have two other structures, and we are done for this week's review. And those two structures are, one, the sympathetic trunk, right here, right, with the ganglia. Right, so sympathetic trunk. You can see how it comes all the way. It comes all the way down the lateral side of the vertebra, right, all the way in the posterior abdominal and lumbar vertebra, right? So you see abdominal, thoracic, lumbar. You can literally see the sympathetic trunk coming all the way down. And then also the last structure is the thoracic duct. Right? That would be this structure right here. Right? And that has to do with the lymph system. Those two are the last structures for this week. I hope this was a beneficial resource, and I was able to highlight and give you guys a different understanding when it comes to seeing these structures visuospatially. I hope this helped. Please let me know any way that I can make these reviews a little bit better, and have a good rest of your week.